and columnist from the USA Today, Bob Nightengale. We'll talk about his amazing career as a baseball writer. He breaks lots of stories on Twitter, on his Twitter handle, from signings to trades. He does great features and stories in the USA Today. We'll talk about his career, as well as everything going on in Major League Baseball right now. Of course, the Angels are up for sale. What's going on with Fernando Tatis and his performance-enhancing drug controversy? We'll talk about the winners and losers at the MLB trade deadline. What could happen with the Yankees, as well as the Dodgers? Everything going on. And by the way, Bob is a Major League Baseball Hall of Fame voter. Talk about whether he thinks Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, even Pete Rose, deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. That and more on this episode of Inside the Huddle, presented by Sportskeeda. I like this. I like this. Hey, Bob, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. Good to see you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Ted.
So I imagine growing up, you always wanted to be a baseball writer, or was like the original, hey, I want to be a baseball player?
It was actually just a sports writer at an early age, maybe from junior high school, at least high school, sports writer, not necessarily baseball. Whatever season it was, I loved. I mean, I loved NBA. I loved the NFL. I loved baseball. So, yeah, I mean, no, we've been happy in any of the other sports as well.
Yeah, and so now you must be pretty proud. Your son is a beat writer covering the Reds, right?
Yeah, correct.
You couldn't talk him out of it? You couldn't talk him out of doing this?
He went to Bradley University. Originally, he was thinking about becoming a broadcaster, and then went that writing route, a little easier path. So, but yeah, no, he enjoys it.
Yeah, and so, you talk about doing the other sports. I mean, baseball, it's kind of your whole summer, every single night, every single day. So I guess sometimes maybe you wish you did football or basketball where you could just do, cover one game a week or something like that.
Well, I'm a lot easier. But football free agency, though, has gone real long. It used to be like a short period. So that beat has become tougher. In the NBA, it's a circus. When free agency hits, baseball drags on. NBA is mad fire, rocket fire right away.
Yeah. And, the whole thing has changed, too, with Twitter. You're very active on Twitter. You break all these stories on Twitter. You do an amazing job breaking stories, getting exclusives. How has it changed as far as the news cycle and the news flow? I mean, we used to open up the newspaper and there would be a huge story or a breaking story in the newspaper the next day. And now it's instant. It's right there at your fingertips. How has it changed really, like, the news cycle and your industry?
Oh, big time. It used to be, there was no internet. And so you write your story and you're done. If your deadline's 11 o'clock at night, you're done. There's nothing you can do for another 24 hours. If you get a great story in the morning, you're still holding on to it all day long. Nowadays, someone breaks something on Twitter, people will catch you up in 10 seconds. There's hardly that story anymore that you wake up in the morning like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening in any sport. Everything is just rocket fire. Most of this stuff is kind of leaked by the agents. So a lot of it is agent driven.
Right. And so how much of that game do you have to play as a guy that, tells in-depth stories, but also breaks stories, to play that game with the agents, with the owners, with players and things like that? I mean, it's a slippery slope, can be a dangerous game at times as information is flying. I mean, how tough is it to manage all of that?
Yeah, it is tougher, particularly when you're going against, the TV entities where they can promise, okay, hey, if you give us this story, we'll put you on TV. We'll do a nice feature, that sort of thing. So that part has changed a lot. It's still the one thing with newspapers, you can tell a long story, like details of a trade deadline, details of a signing. I did a couple of those with the Jeff Morad when he signed Manny Ramirez and Matt Williams. Those things are fun, but even agents are a little reluctant that way too, because that means he had to tell the truth and maybe expose some teams what they really wanted to do.
Right. Yeah. And there's like this game of, you get the money out there, you leak things. The agents like that too, because maybe they can drive up the offer as they're trying to get their clients the best deal. I mean, you think of some of these humongous deals that have taken place over the years, Pujols and Jason Worth and things like that, Bryce Harper, guys that have changed hands. And you think of sometimes when it's leaked by the agents, it's done so to help out their client get more money from the other side.
Yeah, even this past winter, all the talk about Freddie Freeman. Okay, the Yankees are big on him. Then you talk to his agent, Casey Close, and the Yankees never had a phone call once. There was nothing the Yankees wanting Freddie Freeman.
Right.
So yeah, that sort of thing. And if there's wrong information out there with more teams wanting him, the agent's not going to deny it. They just won't return calls because they want people to believe that, hey, 30 teams are interested in our client.
Yeah. And so I imagine it gets complicated, and I go through it too. It gets complicated. Hey, is that agent using me? And you develop relationships and you know maybe who to trust and who not to trust. But is the agent using me as a pawn to get their client more money, or are they just giving me this information? It's sometimes it's tough to decipher.
No, absolutely. And even teams have no idea whether, okay, they say these teams are interested, or are they really interested? And sometimes it gets exposed when a player signs for X amount of dollars, and the team that didn't get him say, "Wait a minute, now he told me he had this type of offer and he didn't."
Right.
So the agents got to be careful too, not to get exposed as being liars.
Right. So as a longtime sports writer, do you get more pleasure out of telling that dynamic story in the USA Today column that you can sink your teeth into, that is exciting, a great story? Or is it the breaking news, a huge signing that you break exclusively? What do you like? What drives you?
I think the long, lengthy story is more fun. It takes time to do, and when you're done with it, there's just like that relief. And a breaking story, you break it, then you got to sit down and write it. And you're just kind of hammering right away as fast as you can, so you don't have that same pleasure of talking to 10 or 15 people about a personality, coach, who what have you, and find interesting stories about the guy.
Yeah, no, and I think about it. I compare it to fast food versus fine dining, and I love those stories. And so sometimes chasing your own tail or chasing someone else's story to confirm it, and yeah, it gets complicated. So for you, your favorite story of all time that you've written, that you've told, that you just loved, whether it was a character with a baseball player, a coach, manager, what's your favorite story when you think of all the stories you've done?
The one I really enjoyed, I don't know if my favorite, but it's up there, was Bo Jackson. So I'm covering the Royals, and Bo Jackson breaks in. And Bo really hadn't done any interviews at all his whole life. And we sat down, we had lunch at a Boston restaurant, and he kind of spilled out his life guts, just what he went through, the whole Tampa football situation, why he went to baseball, his stuttering problem, why he said the word Bo all the time in third person. People thought he was arrogant. Fact is, he couldn't use the word "I" without stuttering. So just kind of open up, and that was a fun story back in the day.
Yeah, and a lot of times people look at these athletes and these baseball players as they're these freak of nature guys with all the money in the world, but you realize when you really get to know them and break it down, some of them are freak of nature athletes. At the same time, a lot of them are just human beings that are good at something and they've worked their tail off to become Major League Baseball players. And the odds of it even happening is slim to none as it is.
Yeah, and these guys, when they get down, they don't like to show it, but they need positive reinforcement. If the guy blows a couple of saves in a row, he needs to be saying, "Hey, you're still great. Don't worry about it." That sort of thing. So a little more of a fragile ego, if you will, on some of these players. But I think when they go through a rut at the plate, the manager loses a bunch of games, they need to be reminded too just how good they are and why they're in that position, because they're a lot more down than we think they are.
Yeah, and look, you work some tough locker rooms too. I've worked some really tough locker rooms where players are having a bad go at it, and you ask a question, maybe it comes out a hair off because it's the way you ask it or don't ask it right, and they get upset. And we've all seen it. It's all happened to each and every one. Toughest locker room you would say you've worked in your career?
I can't think of one. The Royals were a small market team, and that was fun. Back in the day, Padres with Tony Gwynn, couldn't have been nicer. Angels were still mid market. Dodgers were a little more tougher just because of the big market type of thing. And it seems like it's a lot easier to work the small market clubhouse where they enjoy the publicity and stuff like that. Even now, when I show up at a small market, hey, what are you doing here? They're a lot more friendly and outgoing because they're not used to publicity.
Yeah, and by the way, I think it has changed as the iPhones and the cameras and everything is now just put out there. Where back in the day, if there was an argument or a disagreement with a player or a coach and a writer or a sportscaster, a lot of times it was just kind of handled between them in the locker room and people that were in there just knew. But nowadays with Twitter and stuff, all that stuff is just all that is just spilled out and is just thrown out on Twitter and kind of everyone sees it. And I feel like it's kind of almost chilled everyone in the locker room where guys are a little more easy to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, used to be, guys who'd sit back and drink beers after games for hours at a time, not to get drunk, just to talk about the game and life in general. I mean, the
Right.
Philadelphia Phillies were famous for it. The Tigers were famous for it. And nowadays, guys just, even on the road, they leave that clubhouse and go right back to the hotel room.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be seen in a bar or a nightclub or anything like that. Where before it's common to see people. But I think now with the camera phones and everything else, guys are afraid to even be seen having a beer.
Yeah, no, and to that point, I remember a couple years ago, there was a backup Phillies catcher. He was in a bar on the road and he was looking down at his phone, but he had his head like this. And the way that the frame was, that one single frame, people thought, oh, he's passed out at the bar and he's drunk and this and that. And that just wasn't the case. He was reading it. You ever have a moment where you just go like this and looking at your phone? But you know how it is, like one little frame, and they say a picture, tells 1,000 words, but one little frame, and these guys are afraid at times to go out because look, they just want to live their lives. They're young, they're successful, they make good money, but at the same time, that starts going viral, and it's a bad look. Even though they're not doing anything, it causes a huge issue.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be as soon as a guy left the clubhouse, everything is off the record, that sort of thing. I mean,
Right.
they had all the freedom. Remember doing a story on what's happened to the chemistry or camaraderie in clubhouses. And Eric Chavez was the one saying it. Hey, it's not so much the reporters. He goes, we don't trust each other. Guys say something in the clubhouse. The guy tells somebody, it's on Twitter, it's on Instagram, something. So they got
Right.
to be careful even what they say to each other.
Right. Yeah. And so now, as you look around baseball right now, I mean, the game has changed, all these rule changes this year. You're adding playoff teams. Do you like the direction baseball is headed here? I know they're trying to make the game more appealing to the younger generation. Do you like it, or are you an old time purist?
I'm still a purist. I mean, I miss the hit and runs, the stolen bases, that sort of thing. I mean, so everything's so home run, strikeout, walk. Hopefully that changes next year with the pitch clock. But I remember a few years ago, ran to a God, who was it? He was breaking Max Scherzer. He was about to pass Bob Gibson on the all-time strikeout list. Not number one, but and down the road. And Scherzer's from St. Louis. And I
Right.
said, "Oh man, what does that mean to you to pass Gibson's mark?" He goes, "I wish I could tell you it meant a lot, but the game's so different now. Back when
Right.
Gibson pitched, guys were embarrassed to strike out, and it was the worst thing ever. Now guys would care less. So all these strikeout records and stuff we're seeing are nice, but it's just a different game today."
Right. With the launch angles and things like that, it's completely different. And to be honest with you, I mean, I grew up following a National League team. And so I like the art of the double switch. And I like kind of, especially in the playoffs, the fall classic, I love, just the inside baseball double switches. A guy comes in as a reliever to face one batter. I love that strategy. And yes, look, the extra inning stuff that they were doing for a while where the runner would start on second base, it did make it more interesting a little bit. But a part of me was like going, you know what? I miss some of these little things. And I know they're trying to speed up the game and make it more appealing, but is it really speeding up the game?
Well, the extra inning rule, I think they want to do it just was a COVID thing, get guys off the field. And too many players and too many managers like that rule. I
Right.
know I did like a roundtable one spring with Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo. And I think it was Rizzo who said, why do we have the most boring overtime in four major sports? I never even thought of it that way. I said, man, you're right. Because the
Right.
10th inning rolls around, all the fans have the exits. Now they stick around, and there's going to be a conclusion pretty soon. So we'll see. I'd still like to see that rule amended to maybe the 12th inning on, that sort of thing. and we'll see what
Right.
happens with the pitch clock. We need more balls in play. I don't think, I could care less if the game's 4 hours or 3 hours. But, if it's a good, fun game, 4 hours goes quickly, like a lot of World Series games do. But you want to see some action. You want to see some balls put in play.
Do you like the direction of Major League Baseball, the way it's headed? I mean, it seems like football is king now, NBA is second, and America's favorite pastime is slipping kind of into the distance.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think baseball is a distant third right now, and better be careful. Hockey's going to catch up. I mean, when it's got to be a bad sign when ESPN gives up baseball, for the 3 nights, 4 nights a week, and goes to hockey. It
Right.
tells you where kids are thinking. So no, I miss back in the day that way it was. You get tired of watching all the strikeouts and guys strike out 200 times a year. You want to see a guy do a little bit of everything. Like a Paul Goldschmidt this year. It's fun to see him doing everything, playing great defense, home runs, doubles, singles, and it's not just a one-dimensional guy.
Right. And that's why I love the Angels star, Shohei Ohtani. I mean, it's always been crazy to me that you see these pitchers in the National League for years and generations, they don't work on their hitting. And I'm like, well, what are they doing the other 4 days? I know they have a side session and this and that. They look at video, but I always kind of joked. I'm like, it seems like these starting pitchers in between starts aren't doing as much. Why don't they work on their hitting to make themselves better hitters? And then now you have Ohtani who does it all, which I just love. It takes you back to your childhood. Hey, growing up playing baseball, we all did it. You pitched, you hit, you did it all.
Yeah, and I think he's going to open the doors for other kids to start doing the same thing. You grow up and stuff, whether it's little league or high school, the best players were, playing shortstop and pitching. Everybody was doing two things. So, why can't you do it in the major leagues? He proves it's possible. The only thing I wish we'd see Ohtani in the outfield, because he's an amazing outfielder. He's probably the best outfielder on the Angels, certainly the best base runner. But, we get robbed of that a little bit.
Better than
Yeah.
Trout?
Oh, yeah, better than Trout. Yeah, he's got great arm and covers more ground and everything else. But just a fabulous, fabulous athlete.
Why do you think he's not more popular? Do you think it's because West Coast, a lot of these teams that are on the West Coast, a lot of these players, like Mike Trout, one of the greatest players maybe ever, right? And so he doesn't seem that publicized. He's on the Angels, same with Ohtani. And I know the Angels are like the secondary baseball team in LA, but at the same time, it feels like the West Coast players kind of are forgotten about.
They do, just because the time difference is like, 8% of the country runs off the East Coast, Eastern time zone. But yeah, and I think too, playing for the Angels and not having that flamboyancy. Trout's very matter of fact, hits the ball, runs hard.
Right.
Ohtani, obviously, with the language difference, but he's not a flamboyant guy either.
Right.
So I mean, when they look at Tatis, when he's flipping his bat, that sort of thing. Manny does his things. It seems like they become more of a name when the guys start, showing up on social media doing crazy things.
Yeah, and so now Ohtani, he'll be a free agent in a couple of years or eligible for free agency. And I guess if the Angels do sell, I mean, what's going to happen with the Angels? I assume they will be sold. What happens now with arguably one of the greatest players in the game?
Yeah, you may have to do like the Nationals did, reach out to ownership and say, well, do you want to have this guy around or not with Soto? And, what ownership wants to be the one to trade Soto? What ownership wants to be the one to trade Ohtani?
Right.
So I think you have to sit down with Ohtani this winter. What does it take you to stay here? Are you interested at all? And if he's not, you got to go ahead and move it, but you got to change the narrative to say, well, Ohtani wanted out. We didn't want to trade him.
Right. And so what do you think? How do you see it playing out? Or is it too early to even make that assumption?
A little early, but I think there was no way he was being traded at trade deadline. That was kind of a joke. I mean,
Right.
It was a silly narrative there. But I think this winter they got to listen to offers. If he's not getting signed there, you might as well trade him. And that way too, you got the whole winter to trade him. You got 29 teams to, shop him to, and you got to kind of find out from him too what teams would he be willing to go to. Does he want to go east at all, or does it have to be out west?
Yeah, I mean, you think about the Angels, they've had some stud players, Trout and Pujols, and you can debate all day long, the Pujols took that deal leaving St. Louis, that mega deal. How could you pass that up? But you wonder sometimes, are these deals, do they kind of hamstring teams when they sign these ridiculous contracts? You got to sign it, right? I mean, and to attract the players. I mean, it seems like it's working out for the Padres and the Phillies, and it's working out for certain teams. But those massive contracts can really hurt a team.
Yeah, and that's crushed the Angels, and they end up having to release Pujols, released Josh Hamilton, released Justin Upton, that sort of thing. And the Padres are saying, you know what, we'll just take the losses right now and worry about it later.
Right.
I mean, it's mind-boggling. They're 22nd biggest market in the country. If they sign Soto, you got three guys over $300 million,
Right.
which is crazy, considering there's no room for growth. I mean, you got the Pacific Ocean to the west, the desert to the east, Mexico the south, and LA north. So it's very intriguing, the fact they could have that big a payroll with a small market or medium-sized market, the best.
That's why sometimes I never buy when the owners are saying, well, we're losing money and things like that. And, the Phillies went through it with JT Realmuto. They're laying off front office workers and things like that. And then they give JT $100 million. I get it. Like, the guys on the field, that's what sells tickets, and that's what helps with the broadcast rights and people tuning in for those guys. But it's sometimes I go, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and I remember when when the Angels, when they got Pujols, it's right when they're about to sign a big TV deal,
Right.
with the Fox station. So yeah, you never know. And I think a lot of owners aren't making a killing year by year, but they do it when they sell the team. Like I
Yeah.
remember about the team for $183.5 million back in '03. Now it's worth about $2.5 billion. So that's where you clean up.
Yeah. That's a nice little return there on your investment. So, talk about investing. Trade deadline has come and gone. In your opinion, winners, losers of the trade deadline, and what teams are going to be put over the top here going into the playoffs?
Well, certainly St. Louis has got to be one of the big winners. Before it looked like it was okay what they did, but Jordan Montgomery has been lights out for him. 4-0 with the sub-1 ERA, pitched a one hitter his last start, complete game, and Jose Quintana too. So they did very well for themselves. I love Seattle. They again, Luis Castillo. He was easily the best starter in the market, and they got him. I think it's really going to help that team. They, if anybody can upset the Yankees or Astros in the playoffs, it might be Seattle.
Yeah, and Seattle's taken them forever. I mean, they have the longest drought in baseball. It's been since '01. It's crazy they haven't been back to the playoffs.
Yeah, longest route to North American sports. So yeah, it's amazing, especially with expanded playoffs, wild cards, everything else. So, but those two teams stand out so far. I mean, I love what the Padres did, obviously getting Soto and Bell, and particularly Josh Hader, but it hasn't worked out so far. So we'll see. Soto's been okay. Bell was in a huge slump and started to get better, and Hader's been struggling. Sometimes it's tough for a guy to leave an environment you're comfortable in and go somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's why I talk about those large, massive free agent deals. Sometimes there's so much pressure on these guys. I think deep down, Pujols did not want to go to the Angels deep down, but he's like, how can you pass up that money? It was so much more than what the Cardinals were comfortable doing. And so, but then it puts a target on these guys back. And to be able to perform like that, they are human beings. And so you just go, sometimes those deals are bad.
Especially the first year, guys struggle. They put way too much pressure on themselves. You hardly ever see a good free agent contract work out from the very start. Usually it takes a while. But yeah, Pujols, he had a big offer from the Marlins, but he didn't trust that operation. He could have gone to Cincinnati, and their money wasn't much different, maybe 2.25. But the funny thing with Cincinnati, when they didn't get Pujols, they just turned around and gave it to Joey Votto and extended him. So Votto made out Pujols.
Right. So what's going on with the Yankees? It seems like the Yankees are having a tough time right now, post All-Star break. You always expect the Yankees to be a playoff contender or in the playoffs. Things are a little different right now, though.
Yeah, they went through a slide. I'm in a bad team-wide slump. From the hitting's been atrocious. The pitching's been bad, not as bad as the hitting. But hey, better to go through that now than come late September, early October. So I think they'd be fine. Maybe Stanton's, a bigger part of that team than we thought, because they kind of hit the skids after the All-Star break when he went on the injured list. The bullpen's been a mess, from Aroldis Chapman, kind of a shell of himself. Clay Holmes just won an injured list. So a lot of problems now, but because they have a big lead anyway, it's not going to make a difference as long as they get everything back regrouped. Going in October, then they got to figure out how to get past the Astros.
Right. Now you have the Joey Gallo effect. What happened there as far as what impact that has really for both squads.
Yeah, I mean, Gallo, if you're in New York, you got to see whether the guy can handle the pressure or not. It's a different animal than
And
New
so
York.
let me stop you. Why is it a different? Why is it so different for people that don't know? Why is it so different in New York?
Just the big media contingent. When you walk in the Yankee clubhouse, there's about 30, 40 reporters standing around in there. If you have a bad game, you're splashed all over the back page of the tabloids. You can top the world or bottom. It's hardly ever a middle ground there. And it's just a tough place to play. In Boston and Philly might even be tougher. Boston kind of close in there with a smaller city. Same with Philadelphia, it can be very rough. And you got to be, remember Bryce Harper when he signed, we're laughing how quickly will he get booed. It took about 4 or 5 days for him to get booed after signing the big deal. Where if you're in a place like Atlanta or St. Louis, it's a one newspaper town, the fans are cheering you. Players will say the easiest place in the world to play, or maybe the best too, is St. Louis, because there's no pressure whatsoever. As long as you give effort, you can get cheered by the fans, and they win year after year.
Yeah, and I remember, I grew up in Philadelphia, and I remember working out in St. Louis. Scott Rowland one year is hitting 206 before the All-Star break. He's their highest paid player, making a fortune. He's hitting 206. He has, 4 homers. He did not once get booed. And I remember going, he was getting killed in Philly. He was supposed to be the heir apparent to Mike Schmidt and the next Mike Schmidt in Philadelphia. That's impossible to live up to. And then he goes to St. Louis and he can do whatever he wants. It wasn't a big deal. And so that kind of goes to show, just how drastically different they are. But, in Philadelphia, it's a one-team town. There's less to do than in New York. There's less teams. And so, yeah, I think there is a lot of pressure in Philadelphia, but Bryce has handled it really well.
Yeah.
He's handled it really well. And you talk about just how nuts things can get in Philadelphia. I remember opening day 2009, after the Phillies win the World Series, about 2 hours after they get their 2008 World Series rings on opening day of 2009, the Phillies are, getting smoked on opening day and they're getting booed. And I remember going, geez, really? They just won the World Series for the first time since 1980 and they're getting booed on opening day. They just got their World Series rings. What else do you want? To me, that kind of sums up just the pressure in Philadelphia. But it is interesting to hear just why is it so different than in a St. Louis and in a, maybe a smaller market.
Yeah. I remember being in Boston for opening day and Lee Smith blew the save. And the headlines the next morning, the Boston Herald was, wait till next year. Already give up the season. And I forget if it was Brian Cashman or someone said, when you play in New York or Boston, you're not playing a 162-game season. You're playing 162 one-game seasons. Like they treat every game almost like the Super Bowl.
Right. Yeah. It's almost the NFL football effect. And so, I wanted to ask you about Fernando Tatis. He spoke today. I think a lot of people were shocked at the whole PED controversy and everything going on. What are your takeaways from not only the situation, but what he said?
Well, I thought he's very contrite today. He announced also he's going to get shoulder surgery. So the Padres wanted him to have that a year ago. So now he gets that done. At least he says, hey, it was a mistake. He says he was doing it for a skin condition, but whatever. At least he's not blaming anybody else, but blaming himself. I think he was very, the teammates probably welcomed his apology. But I've never seen, all my years, I've never seen a guy get popped for PEDs and the team turn on him like they did. I mean, GM AJ Preller was all over him. We can't trust this guy. The teammates lashed out at him. So he had a problem in that clubhouse, and this just exacerbated the whole thing.
But is that the better way to approach it than what we saw, maybe a decade or more ago with Bonds and Clemens and Pettit and a lot of people coming out initially and lying and McGuire and Sosa and all those accusations? Is it a better way to handle it now with everything is just being honest and going, look, we messed up or he messed up. He needs to win our trust back?
Well, I think in a case like Tatis, I mean, he got caught. No way around it. He had to apologize. I mean, you say all you want about Bonds and Clemens and stuff. Never tested positive for a drug test, and
Right.
the most important, they were never suspended for anything. So even like a Hall of Fame voting, I voted for Bonds and Clemens every year, and Sammy Sosa, but not for Alex Rodriguez or Manny Ramirez or Rafael Primero. Just in the fact that they were suspended and they hurt their teams. Bonds and Clemens and some of these other guys are in the Hall of Fame already, helped their teams. Whether they cheat or not, they certainly helped their teams.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I know a lot of voters, you're a major league, you're a Hall of Fame voter. And so it is interesting to me that, look, Bonds and Clemens denied in the final year of eligibility. It's interesting to me that people have those different takes. And I just I'm not a voter, but I look at it going, Bonds and Clemens were still the best players of their generation, even before all this stuff. And so I just go, put an asterisk or make a different hall on the side. That's just my opinion. And I know everyone has a different opinion, but you do believe that Bonds and Clemens should be in.
I do. We'll see what happens with the Veterans Committee. My big thing too is, believe what you want, but there was no testing until 2004.
Right.
And so everything that happened before 2004 was almost free game. So many guys were doing stuff. I mean, Clemens was facing plenty of hitters on the juice. Bonds was facing plenty of pitchers on the juice, that sort of thing. But now when the rules are in place and you violate that, like Alex Rodriguez crushed the Yankees in 2014, missed the entire season. Manny was popped 3 times. If the Padres miss on the playoffs, who's going to get blamed here? Just one guy, Tatis.
Right. Right. So, I mean, I just look at it like all these guys were still the best players of their generation. And I know there's that debate. Well, what about the guy that was on the fringe and that so-called 4A player that, was hurt by this? And, people don't think about the people that were hurt by this and the players that maybe didn't take it, that, maybe they didn't get that huge money and that huge contract. But I mean, I look at it like Bonds and Clemens, they were still the best players of their generation by a long shot. And, I even go back to the Pete Rose and what's your take on Pete Rose, being allowed in the Hall of Fame? Should he be allowed? Should he not be allowed?
I'd like to see him be put on the ballot. Never been on the ballot for us to vote for. I will say all those years, there was never any signs in the clubhouse, no steroid taking, no, that sort of thing. But it was always no gambling. Right. And he gambled. If you want to argue, well, he gambles a player. I mean, gambles a manager, not a player. He goes as a player, that sort of thing. I think just, he's said different things in years. He still, rushed for casinos. I think he gets in one day, but only after he's dead. I don't think
I'm
the
with
Hall of
you.
Fame of Baseball wants him in there alive, just because I think he could have a chance to embarrass the Hall of Fame.
It's interesting. I didn't want to say it. I hate to say it, but I agree with you. I think after he passes away, he'll get in, almost saying like, look, should he not have that satisfaction? It sounds cruel, but should he also not have that satisfaction because he did know better and he gambled on baseball? And look, okay, he gambled as a manager, but maybe not as a player. And so, okay, he's not a Hall of Fame manager. He's a Hall of Fame player, but I mean, he's one of the greatest players ever. And so it's tough. I do believe in second chances. And so it's a shame though, you go back to Bonds, Bonds is kind of like out of the game and not really celebrated, and Clemens, and you go, shouldn't these guys be celebrated? And look, the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, how much fun was that chase, that home run chase? And it helped bring base. It was fun. And so it's fun. And you talk about entertainment. And I know, okay, they're breaking Roger Maris's record and things, but it was fun. And that's what baseball's about. It's entertainment.
Yeah, it was a blast. Of all things I covered in baseball, that was the most fun thing, covering the home run race. I was doing more McGwire stuff than Sosa because he was in the lead. But the night that McGwire broke a Maris's record and hugging that Maris family, that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Everybody in the press box, you got goosebumps, guys are crying, that sort of thing. It was spectacular. So yeah, it doesn't make you a bad person using that stuff. It's a lot of his pride, and I really do believe, like in Bond's case, when he saw all the attention that McGwire and Sosa was getting, like, okay, those guys are cheating. Let me show you what I can do if I do this stuff. And the year he hit 73 home runs, I covered a lot of their games. He could have hit 90 or 95 home runs. He was never getting any pitches to hit.
Yeah.
I've never seen like it. Yeah, I think Bonds is one of the top 2 or 3 players who ever lived.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day he'll get in. Bob, thank you so much for joining me. Great insight on everything going on in Major League Baseball as well as your career. I appreciate it.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I'm Jeff Skversky for Inside the